Social penetration theory, I once had a professor that said social penetration theory is much less interesting than it sounds. So take it or leave it. But this is kind of the theory, as I was talking about when I was talking about uncertainty reduction, that really picks up after the relationship has kind of gone through that first final impression. How do we actually expand the relationship and take the relationship to the next level on a deeper level? And that is through communication. It's actually through self-disclosure. So there are 3 layers, this theory predicts, to relationship development. And superficial would be things that everyone knows about you. The social personal would be things only close friends and family would know about you. And your core is your inner personality. Now I need to explain this a little bit further, because this is one of those where if you just look at the definitions here, you're really not going to understand the theoretical aspect of it. So Altman and Taylor are the creators of this theory. Sorry, I had to think about that for a minute. And they said to think about this as an onion. And what we're talking about here with social penetration is between 2 different people, what layer of the onion are these 2 different interpersonal people at? Or maybe it's not even interpersonal yet. It's really not interpersonal until it gets to that social level. So you can think about your relationship with one other person. Is it superficial? Is it social? Is it core? How much have you disclosed to them? What have you disclosed to them? Where has your relationship penetrated to? And it can vary. If you may have penetrated the core with someone, but that doesn't mean that you, with that person, you always talk about core level things, if that makes sense. You still may talk about superficial things like the weather. I mean, I talk about the weather with my husband all the time. That doesn't mean we only have a superficial relationship. So just to clarify that. And again, this is not related to, I'm going to say something superficial about myself because everyone knows it about me. This is, let's look at the relationship between you and someone else. What level of depth and what level of breadth do you have in that relationship? And that's what we're talking about here. The depth through self-disclosure. And I probably should have even mentioned that before, that self-disclosure is how we create relationships with others and how we penetrate through those 3 different layers in the onion. And then breadth is the number of topics at one level as we go around like superficial in the onion. And so let's take a step back here and think about an example. So let's say June and Henry, which sound like very 1950s names, literally just came off the top of my head. So let's go with that. June and Henry. They're talking, and they're talking about very superficial things. They've known each other a very long time, but they're pretty much just acquaintances. Maybe they're coworkers. But they always talk about things like the weather. In fact, it's pretty well established that they know they're going to talk about the weather whenever they talk. They've known each other for maybe 20 years. We would say that their relationship is likely superficial with a lot of breadth. They have talked about a lot of different things, like I said, mainly the weather, but maybe other things too. Superficial things like, perhaps cats, which really could be fairly superficial. I was using examples about cats. But they talk about very superficial things whenever they see each other. They've known each other a long time, so they've really kind of penetrated a lot of those topics. So they have a lot of breadth with their relationship, but really no depth. They've pretty much covered all the superficial topics. But they don't move any further. Why not? Because one of them is going to have to take a risk to move into more of a social aspect. And social can be kind of a little bit compared to like the personal level of uncertainty reduction, in that it is more risky to say something that's more on a social level here, because it is going to be more personal. It is going to kind of put your thoughts and ideas and opinions of things out there, and since you're maybe not totally sure how that person's going to react, again, this is somewhat too about predicting behaviors. Generally what we do is we just tend to self-disclose in kind or on the same level, because somebody's got to take that extra leap. And you know what happens if someone self-discloses something too early? Have you ever heard of the stranger on the bus phenomenon, where you're sitting there and the person tells you all about their STI that they had last week when you were just talking about how good the chicken at KFC you had for lunch was? That's definitely not in kind. And that probably, in most situations, is going to make you go right to, if you want to talk about in terms of uncertainty reduction, to the exit phase, you're probably not going to establish a relationship with that person. So you can see that now, kind of how that works. Now, as you do get along with somebody, and people do tend to take those risks to kind of disclose things that do get deeper and deeper, that's when we get into depth. And depth is through the layers of the onion. So again, if you think about what you're doing with the onion, is you're peeling off the levels and going deep into the onion when you are establishing depth, whereas you're peeling the layers around the onion when you're breadth. So you might stay on that superficial level of the onion for breadth, but for depth, you're actually going in from superficial to social, and then maybe from social to core. In core, only maybe 1 or 2 people, it's said, very few people you may have penetrated the core within your relationship. Now, some people more than others. I tend to be, if I feel like I know you, I tend to trust a lot more, and I tend to get more, I tend to disclose a lot faster. And so I would say that I probably have a good 4 or 5 people in my life that probably I've penetrated the core with, if not more. But usually it's just maybe 1 or 2 people, because it's just so risky to put yourself out there so much and tell someone, all those inner deep dark secrets. That's, like I said, that's a very risky thing to do. So you don't have a lot of people you do that with. Most of the people you have an interpersonal relationship in your life is on a social level, but the large majority of people that you converse with on a daily basis is probably more at a superficial level. Things that just about anybody can know about you, especially if you really want to take that definition literally, because you can find probably enough information about someone on Facebook to call pretty much anything someone about from Facebook as superficial. So that's kind of how social penetration works. This is usually not a fast process. It potentially could be a fast process, especially if you penetrate depth very quickly and you kind of move in very quickly, and that person is with you and you're on the same level and you're in kind, and their norm of reciprocity, I say something, you say something, kind of on that same level, and it goes through. You can penetrate through and get to the core quickly, and you can have a lot of depth. But is that a good thing? Is it a good thing just to have a lot of depth and not a lot of breadth? Or is it a good thing to have a lot of breadth and not a lot of depth? There's been a lot of discussion about that, and I don't have the answer for you. It could go either way. So that's something to think about. I think, in my opinion, there would be a good balance between both. You would have a lot of depth and a lot of breadth in a solid relationship. So I could go on discussing this for a while, but I'm going to actually leave some of the discussion up to you.